Hi everyone, my name is Eric and I'm the developer of Virtuous Heaven, which is a game about endless dogs, radical friends and the end of history. It's also an exploration platformer to some degree, but that's still all up for debate. Anyway, this is like the development update for like October of 2022, which means it all deals with whatever happened in last September. So what did happen in last September? So my plans were, Virtuous Heaven was going or is going to be at EGX in September, or has been going on EGX in September, which is definitely grammatically correct. So the task was fairly simple: finish the EGX demo, and do not fall into despair in the face of whatever, everything impossible and all that kind of stuff. And this is what I actually did in September. I did finish and release the demo. It's also playable on Steam, by the way, right now, and I think I'm going to just keep it up there, despite it being slightly not ideal for it being a Steam demo and all that kind of stuff. But so far I haven't really seen it doing any harm, so I figured why not just keep it up there for now. I occasionally fell into despair. Where I have also some ideas why I fell into despair that didn't really have to do with the sheer impossibility of everything really, but just aside stuff. I did plan the next few months of development work, and I also made a new camera. So let's talk about all of this, what happened, talk a little bit about how EGX went, as far as at least I can tell from not having been there in person. And all that other kind of stuff. So first of all, one reason why this has been a bit of a weird week or weird last 10 to 14 days, and which kind of makes it hard for me to properly gauge how good I feel about the game and all that kind of stuff is basically I'm on the tail end of having been weaning myself off of antidepressants, and especially over the last 10 days, which was exactly when EGX was happening, I really felt what's usually withdrawal syndromes when you're getting off of antidepressants, which is, for example, a propensity for more negative thoughts and all that kind of stuff, which definitely did happen. I realized this yesterday. This isn't the first attempt I'm trying to record this video, but I realized this yesterday, as I was talking about all this kind of stuff, how much of my perspective on how things went was very, very clouded in negative thoughts. And then I realized, wait a second, how much of this is actually because it was negative, and how much of this has to do with brain chemistry being weird in that time. So it's a bit hard for me to get a good grip on that. But anyway, let's talk about how EGX actually what happened. And how I feel about it, and how I want to go on from there, and also talk a little bit about the new camera that I made, which is just an aside thing, but I'm fairly proud of what I did there. Making the demo was kind of interesting because, and I think I talked about this in the last video as well already, because I was already, I think, in the process of making the demo then. It was kind of interesting because I was confronted with having to actually make something that explains to other people what the game might be about, which is a huge step considering that a lot of what I did before, I built areas and levels and tested things out, but I never really had to explain these aspects of the larger also more narrative aspects of the game to people. Still not sure how well the demo worked in that regard, but at least I put some stuff in there. And yeah, so it was I was forced to make some very definitive decisions about what I want this game to be. And this kind of helped me steer me towards okay, this is the direction I want to take the whole game into. This is what I want it to be about. These are the things I have to keep in mind while doing this. And in that regard, the demo helped tremendously to just force myself to make decisions. Because otherwise I probably would be waving my arms around, not really knowing what to do. EGX itself was interesting. So I built the demo. Let's wind back a little bit. this wasn't the first time that I exhibited a game within the Left Field collection of EGX, which is like a separate thing where like people can submit their games to. It's usually like around 20 spots, and you can submit your game like to the Left Field collection, and it doesn't cost you anything, and you don't have to be there to exhibit your game in person. If you can't be there, like things will be taken care of, obviously. In general, it's probably better to be at a convention if you can do it, but I just can't because of money reasons, and also because COVID was still a thing, and I just didn't feel very comfortable doing it. In hindsight, I probably would have gone. At the same time, I'm kind of glad that I didn't for other reasons. So just to put things into perspective, and also like the Left Field collection is, as far as I know, basically being managed by one person who does the curation and the setup on the day of the exhibition starts and all that kind of stuff. And so it's kind of like it's part of EGX, but also it's kind of like its own thing to some degree, which means that it's kind of also relying on like the organizers of EGX providing certain things. And apparently this didn't happen the same way as in the past, so I built the demo for Virtuous Heaven in such a way that I just assumed, okay, people will be using a controller, because the last times that I like exhibited at Left Field, it was always possible for your station to have like a controller attached to it. So because I wanted to make something where I also, because again, the game has fairly complex controls, and I wanted to figure out a way to, okay, how do I teach people how to play this game, how to engage with the more like complex movement system, and at least for them to know that they are there and all that kind of stuff. So I basically built out a whole tutorial, and for the tutorial, for the text boxes and all that kind of stuff, to make things more simple for me, I just assumed, okay, they will be using a controller, so I'm just going to basically put text in there that tells you press the right trigger to dash and all that kind of stuff, and not something where I would have to dynamically adjust the tutorial message depending on which kinds of controls they're using, if they have rebound their controls and all that kind of stuff. So I was like fairly set in that regard, built everything out, it worked fine, and sent it out, told the person who ran the Left Field collection, hey, let me know, like the game is like built around a controller in mind, please let me know if you don't get a controller so that I can adjust. I sent it out Monday before EGX started. EGX started, I think, on Thursday, and on Thursday around noon I got a message from them saying, well, it turns out this year I didn't get any controllers or headphones for Left Field collection provided, so your game doesn't run. Because in my Virtuous 7 does have keyboard controls. Like I usually build my games around like both controls working, but like the demo specific parts I built just with gamepad controls in mind. So you couldn't skip the intro logo, the intro text box of the demo with a keyboard command. So it required a gamepad input. Message, no controllers, blah blah blah. Can you make them is it possible for you to provide a version that works with a keyboard? Well, after about and this is why I'm partially I'm torn between kind of wanting to be at EGX, to see how well the game did there, and also kind of glad that I wasn't at EGX, because boy was I shouting around after I got that message. Just out of sheer frustration, because it's oh god, the convention has started, my game isn't running, I'm not there to do anything, what do I do, oh god, now I have to do keyboard controls, I'm starting to do keyboard controls, the game feels awful to play, what do I do, oh god, this is all awful, why am I doing this to myself, why don't I just go back to bed and just forget about it. Anyway, about 2 to 3 hours later, I had a version with working keyboard controls. I also found two additional bugs in the process that I fixed. and like send out a new build. A day or two later, I send out another build because I found another bug and all that kind of stuff. I think like in the process of the convention, like there was at some point a gamepad also provided, so that was also kind of a nice thing. And also like shout out to like David, who like again organizes Left Field, who like did their best to get everything running. Like from what I've heard, there was like the problem also like was that there were no headphones like provided, and like some of the games that were exhibited there kind of needed them. So that's kind of like, it's always like a bit of a like, it's kind of unfortunate how in that regard like someone was being kind of left hanging out to dry like from like a larger convention organizer, which is kind of a shame. Also because Left Field is a nice place, and I usually recommend people to submit their games to Left Field because I think it's a nice place to like exhibit your game. It's a nice way to get your game to a convention, which normally costs several €1,000s or whatever, to like buy table space and put your stuff up there and all that kind of stuff. So it's usually a nice thing, but that was kind of like, it was frustrating. I would still, I think, recommend it to people. Another thing that was kind of frustrating, and that's again like more like EGX organizers at large and not as much like the folks who run Left Field, because I have no clue how much they know about this kind of stuff. Because, well, there was also a Steam event happening in parallel to EGX, where like, again, like similar to the Steam Next Fest or like other like convention events that like have been going on Steam. I think a few weeks ago there was also one for like Tokyo Game Show, where like there was a separate page that listed all the Steam pages of all the games that were exhibited at EGX at the same time, with also live stream stuff happening and all that kind of stuff, which is neat, because it also drove a ton of traffic to like the Steam page of Virtua 7, comparatively a ton of traffic, not probably in comparison to the other like games that were shown at EGX, but like compared to like what the attention that this game got before EGX, like it was quite a jump. However, I had no idea that this was coming. So, and like just by pure chance, so I had the demo finished and I sent it over to like, so that it can be then installed at EGX and run at EGX. And well, I had this convention demo and I was thinking, well, I can just put the demo up on Steam and also have it be available there for the duration of the event at least. So I could then do a tweet and say, hey, if you're not at EGX and still want to play the demo here, you can do it via Steam. So I did all that, not knowing that there was a Steam event coming. So I kind of lucked into that, but it still kind of felt like that moment, or like the thing where like I don't know, in one place I described it as, it's kind of like a group of people suddenly bursting into your apartment when you're sitting on your couch in your underwear and are not prepared at all for them. So it kind of felt like that. You were kind of like, again, caught a little bit with your pants down, so to speak. And it didn't felt like nice, because I knew, oh god, a lot of people are suddenly like visiting this page. I don't have a live stream set up. I don't have anything. Like, for example, last year for GB Rover, I did like a comment and playthrough of like the demo where I talked about the game in more detail, which I had like run in the background for most of the, like for a few days of the event. I think I also like did, I think 1 or 2 live streams during the event itself, where like I think I built a level and I talked about stuff. So I had like some stuff planned out before the Steam Next Fest for GB Rover. And since I had no idea that the Steam event was coming for EGX, I had nothing prepared in that regard. So the only thing I really did was like, okay, I played through the demo uncommented, because I didn't have really the energy and the time to like really plan this and like think about, okay, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to say, so that it's not as rambly as, for example, this video here. So I just did an uncommented playthrough and had it like run basically on loop, so that there's something there, because again, like these live streams things could bring in traffic, and even if it's a little bit of traffic, it's still meaningful, and it's still something like a way and like a means to like bring more people, or maybe interest more people in taking a look at the game and all that kind of stuff. So I wish I had a bit more time to prepare this. And I wish I had known in advance that like this was coming, because it was a bit frustrating to like in the morning I was just checking, okay, is the demo live, and suddenly I see this big banner like EGX Steam event thing above like on top of like the Steam page of Virtua 7. It's like, oh, cool, nice to know about that. So that was like would have been nice to know. No idea who like why there wasn't any communication or whatever, but it was a bit frustrating in that regard. Overall, and that's like, and this is like the weird thing where I think like again like brain chemistry being weird, and therefore like your perspective maybe being a bit too negative or whatever. So it's a bit weird for me to like gauge, okay, how well did the event go. So overall, over the course of like EGX, and I think this is largely due to the Steam event and not as much to like because the game also was like physically there. I almost quadrupled the wishlist entries for Virtua 7, which sounds nice, but also like in absolute terms, it's not a lot. I'm about at the same level as I was with GB Rover last year. Or like around like when GB Rover went through the Steam Next Fest, a little bit lower than that, but like it's fairly comparable to where GB Rover was, which is nice. But also like, and then this is like the thing where you're like getting into this thing where, because like on one hand it's nice, on the other hand you then look at your like the projections you did like few months ago in terms of like, okay, if you were to make enough money with selling this game to not have to get welfare anymore here, which is kind of like, it's hard to say this is still my goal because it's basically impossible with the resources I have, but like it's a nice wish, let's say it this way, and like just knowing the number that you theoretically would have to like get to, and then comparing it to where you are right now and like how far off you are. Basically I'm about like, I need like, basically the numbers would have to be about like 10 times higher than they are right now to have like a realistic projection that it like reaches the amount of like wishlist entries and like then projected like sales in the first months and blah 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 blah, that it might actually earn enough money. So it's like you look at that, and again, this is like getting confronted with the sheer impossibility of everything, and then thinking, and then also like, because again the demo came out and I wanted to figure out, okay, are people talking about the game? If people are talking about the game, what are they saying? So I monitored Twitter a bit more. Didn't see much aside from one person saying the demo was too easy, which is interesting for something else I realized, or I saw earlier this week. Last week at this point. So I monitored Twitter and also like did a thing where I thought, okay, let's just search Twitter for Virtua 7 for the time frame since I announced the game and today. And what I found out, that basically the only person talking about the game on Twitter was me, which in turn kind of can be interpreted as, well, the only person who really cares about this thing and like the continued development of this thing is myself. which was a weird thing. And again, like in a moment where like you are generally more vulnerable to like negative thoughts and like falling into despair and all that kind of stuff. So it was a hard few days to deal with it. I kind of got around to it. Like the one positive thing I would say that happened with that is that it forced me to like, it's not that I'm now saying, okay, nobody cares about it, so I just won't make the game. It's cancelled. No, that's not what I'll do. It's more like realizing, okay, first of all, don't stop expecting the impossible, because that's what it is. Like, I don't have a lot of resources. Like, to expect me to reach the degree of attention and also the degree of polish and like presentation in a video game with the resources that I have is like to expect this from me is like I'm just setting myself up to hurt myself like quite a lot. So that's just not healthy. So that's the first thing. The second thing is then, okay, try to find a way. Try to find a way forward. Don't get stuck in this. Oh God, nobody cares about it and all that kind of stuff. But try to, if you are the only person who cares about this, try to find a way to actually bring this into existence because you care about it. You want this to exist. You want to tell this story and you want to show this thing to other people. So find a way to do this. So, and that's what I mostly did over the last week is like sitting down and actually starting to write out, okay, what are what's the narrative through line that I want to build here? What are the narrative beats for like each separate area that I want this game to have? And then also planning, okay, how long would it take me to build all this out? How long, like how much time do I need to spend with these things? And right now and this is like obviously fairly preliminary because it's like who knows what happens, but like if everything goes about as planned, I have like something that's quote unquote finished by the end of April next year, which is not that much time, but also again just like being confronted with I don't have the resources. I am not sure if I will ever get the resources to make like a larger version of this. Okay, let's bring it down to like what you can do and what you can make, and go from there. And again, this is like around 6 months, which is not a lot of time, but I think still doable because I already have a lot of stuff that I can use. So it's not that I have to like, for example, if I want to build like some kind of dungeon area or whatever, like a larger like interconnected thing, I don't have to create all the graphical assets for it because I already have like most of them. All I have to do is like to actually build out these areas. And again, in this regard, the building out the demo area helped a lot because I kind of already had to do that. I had to think about, okay, what is it that I want to communicate in this area to the player? What is it, like, what kind of characters do they run into? What's the character's deal and all that kind of stuff. So that helped me, and that also made me realize, okay, this is something I can do in the, like in the larger game itself, like in between, like the flying around and kicking robots in the face, which is like also part of it, but I feel like at this point the movement system and all that kind of stuff will carry itself because most of the work I did over the years on this game basically and that like persisted is like the movement system. And I think this is like fairly done at this point, but the rest still needs a lot of work. So that's like a lot of the stuff that I did. And like in the meantime, in between, like okay, planning out these areas and like trying to find like narrative beats that I want to hit, and like also trying to find ways where it's guaranteed that at least players will know that these things happen and will like see the information, like regardless of if they listen to it or whatever. But like at least trying to find ways to make sure that okay, after the players did this, they will need to do like, or will have like a moment, or there will be a thing where like X happens and they get the other kind of information that tells them about Y and whatever. So like trying to do that and like trying to build the game with these things in mind and like trying to structure things at least on paper around these things like helped a lot. And like aside from that, I sat down because I also like in the meantime found at this point 2 videos of people playing the Steam demo of Virtuous Heaven, which by the way is still available if you want to play it. I don't see any reason to like, at least for now, to like make it unavailable. So if you want to play it, please play it, but keep in mind, use a gamepad for it. And so like one thing I saw there was like, first of all, to some degree, you can't force people to engage with the system, with the systems the games provide you, even if you tell them that they should use it. Like I can't help people when at one point there's a text box that says, you press this button to use a dash, and then it's under there it says dashing makes you invincible, and then they just still run headlong into enemies. I can't help them then at this point. Or when they complain about them having to redo like a whole big chunk of the level because they died to a boss when they walked past a checkpoint several times in a row. So this is at this point, and I told like before, like one of the first things that demo tells you is how to use checkpoints. Anyway, this is like the one frustrating part, but I also saw more bugs in regards to how the camera works. Like for example, there was like a place in a video where someone dropped into like a dropped down like into a lower level of the area, and the camera didn't follow them, which was incredibly annoying. And I'm still like, me and platformer cameras is like, this is like a constant through line. So like since I started making games, it's like always a source of frustration for me, because I want them to do certain things, but also for a long time I wasn't very good at programming, and I might still not be very proficient at it. So my solutions very often are incredibly convoluted and weird and only work in certain circumstances, and if people move slightly different, everything breaks. The version of the camera that's currently in the demo is like about 80% like functional, or 80 to 90% like perfectly fine, but there are like certain edge cases where it just does weird stuff. Also, like if in certain circumstances the camera can cause the whole game to lock up, which if you play GB Rover, for example, GB Rover uses the exact same camera and has the exact same problem, and that has to like the way to do with basically the camera on certain stages or in certain moments defines for itself like its borders. And if it's like weird in some way, it enters like an infinite loop state, and then once something enters an infinite loop, a program, then the whole thing crashes because you can't get out of it. And that was a problem with the camera. And over the last week, I finally found a solution after like 3 days and 1 day where I gave myself like fairly awful motion sickness. I found a solution where basically the camera that I have now, this new version, does about 90% of the things that the old camera did, or maybe 95%. It's in some cases it's a bit too stiff, like it's responsive and all that kind of stuff. But for example, like when you start from a standstill and start walking, the camera jutters a little bit, and it has to do with how it tracks movement and how it moves and all that kind of stuff. So there's still like some cases where it's not quite ideal, but it's fixable. But the important part is that the whole way that it like deals with like its own limitations, like with spaces which define, okay, the camera can only move in these constraints, it's much more reliable, much like the collision stuff and all that kind of stuff that tracks this, it's much simpler, which means that all these cases where like the camera kind of bugs out and like gets to a space where it's not supposed to be, or where it, for example, just doesn't follow the player, these cases should not exist anymore, which immediately makes it much more usable. Again, there's still some work left, but it's like, as far as I can tell right now, knock on wood, it's mostly like polish work, and the larger system works much better, is much more simpler. It's so funny how I spent like 3 days basically making something that in the game looks almost exactly the same, unless you pay really close attention to things. And but the inner workings are completely different. And that's kind of, that's, I guess, like some, like the quirks of programming sometimes. But I'm very happy with where it's now, and I hope that it works. And again, I probably won't be updating the demo because, with the new version, because I really don't want to touch it in that regard. And also to some degree, I know that the demo works in that regard, aside from like some minor things, but usually it's not a problem. So I probably won't put the new camera in the demo, also because I don't want to get in a state where all I do is like update the demo every 2 weeks or whatever and don't do anything else. But I'll try and use the new camera for like the next few builds of the game, and like seeing how everything works there. So that was kind of nice. And yeah, I did a ton of basically like that kind of work, and it kind of like also like the last week really reinvigorated my motivation to keep working on this, because like for September, like sometimes it was just really hard, and also like this is something I'm realizing now, like because I'm kind of like, I don't want to say I'm past the withdrawal stuff, because who knows, but I'm feeling much better now, and like looking back at things, I've kind of realized that I was kind of negative over like a lot of like September, so this is like something I had to like realize that like, okay, maybe some of the stuff that I thought were like actually real aren't that important or terrible as I thought they would be. So yeah, that's like another thing, again, like working through that kind of stuff, which is why it's like not falling into despair is like always a goal for me, because sometimes it's hard, because making games on your own is hard. Making a game of this size is hard. I never did something that's this big and this like ambitious, especially on a narrative level and a like explicit narrative level, and I have to be careful not to like just fall apart there. But yeah, it'll all work out in the end, I think. I still want this game to exist. I hope it will be able to tell the things that I want to tell people, and tell it in a way that's interesting to others. Like one fear that I always have, especially with my writing, and you might see one part of it in the demo, is I'm always afraid that I might get too preachy about stuff and not really have the characters talk, and more like have like me talk to the players, which in some cases is fine, but again, you have to strike a balance there, that it's not just like me like spending like enforcing like 48 hours of people like me like yelling at them, because I would not have to make a video game for that. I can just like get myself a box and stand myself on like some street corner or whatever and just yell at people. That would be much simpler, or like just do YouTube videos. But anyway, that's like a general like fear I have. I don't know how much of a fear it will be in the end, but like something to be mindful of. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about what I want to do this month. This month, I actually, for real, want to finish the first area of the game. And hopefully, by next month, I can actually show folks what I like have in mind in general, like how the game will be playing out. Because again, also like over the course of making the demo, I kind of realized some things, how I want to gate progression and build around that. So like that's like the largest goal, and as always, don't fall into despair in the face of the sheer impossibility of everything, because that's always a goal, and I think that should be a goal for every one of us, not only for me but in general, because falling into despair doesn't help anyone. All you do is feel bad, and it's like it's always important to like, sure, maybe fall into despair every once in a while, but also at some point realize that there has to be a way out of these states, and like has to be a way forward, instead of just like submitting yourself into like feeling awful and like thinking that nothing can change ever. So that's like a thing that is always important. Going to be exciting like the next few weeks to see, okay, how well can I do this. I'm also thinking about maybe trying to pitch this game to publishers at this point. I do have the demo, which is fairly polished. Overall, I'm not speaking of like despair and all that kind of stuff. I'm not very optimistic that anyone would pick this up, because just like in terms of like the numbers I've gotten so far, it doesn't really strike me as something where a publisher would look at and think, yeah, there's like a larger like mainstream audience like interest behind this. I would gladly pick this up. I mean, let's just put it this way. Maybe a publisher would pick it up that's not very good. Like, this is like my experience. Like, after Ajax, I got one message from a publisher that I did not find very trustworthy. So that's like where you can see, yeah, okay, let's see what happens from there. But again, since I also like try to go by the rule of like don't reject yourself for other people, always force them to reject it like for you. So try and like apply for these things and see what happens. So I'll probably do that, but I would also have to like take a week out of like my schedule to build a pitch deck and all that kind of stuff, which in the end could also help because you would be forced to really think about, okay, what is this game actually? Which is also a thing I'm still struggling to some degree. It's a bit better at this like time around, but it's something that has been going on for quite a while. Anyway, so that's where I'm at. Let's see where everything is next month. Summer's over, so everything's going to be dark and miserable again. So we'll see how that goes. Speaking of despair and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, so if you're like interested in like how this game is coming along and all that kind of stuff, you can follow @Mokograd on Twitter. This is where I post most of the like updates on how the game's going and like little gifts of stuff that I can think of. And obviously you can subscribe to this YouTube channel and wishlist Witcher 7 on Steam. That would be cool. You can also follow the Steam page if you want, which does something. I think you get like quicker access to like news posts or whatever. I think that happens when you follow a game. I don't know, but it's a button that you can press, and that's always good, you know, like for other people. But yeah, please do these things if you're interested in those. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I see you next month, I guess. Goodbye.